Hello, Anthony.
Hello.
We're here today to talk about IRS Notice LT11. You are sent that if the IRS has not received any payment from you for your overdue taxes. The letter is to advise you of their intent to seize your property or rights to property. I'll quickly touch on if you've already paid, what should you do? Make sure you contact the IRS, send proof of payment to them at the address on the notice, and you always want to follow up to ensure that they have properly applied it to your account. We've talked in the past about how they can maybe miscode things or not apply it to the right area. So if you think you've paid, make sure you follow up with the IRS. What's more important is if you haven't paid or can't afford to pay, and you're saying there's rights to appeal this.
Yeah, this is one of the most essential notices around. Now, if you did happen to open all your IRS mail, you'd say, this is a strange notice I'm getting because the IRS already has sent me a notice to intent to levy, and that was the CP 504. So now they're sending another one, notice of intent to levy. Okay, well, obviously notices of intent to levy mean nothing. I'll just ignore it. You throw it in a pile. Well, this one's critical. This LT11 is the one that we're always on the lookout for when we're representing a client because, man, it is so important to resolving a problem because this gives you a direct line into IRS appeals. The IRS Office of Appeals is where we go to really get some great deals where we have some situations that might be a little bit difficult to explain under the normal guidelines. Great example is when you have taxpayers who might be making a little bit more money, their expenses are larger, and you're trying to argue that, well, some of these should be allowed because they're necessary to their living expenses. Right. This is where you need to be, right here in the Office of Appeals. And so we always love it when we have that open to us. What we don't want to see is the LT11 sent. Then on the transcript, it will say, received, returned, unsigned, unclaimed by the taxpayer, and then the 30 days expired. There are some other appeals we can do after that. And if you do get another period, we can get, even if you missed the LT11 for 1 year and you have another one, we can group them all together. So we can still deal with it. It's just much better if we can get this right away, this LT11. Really helpful. And this is the thing. This is sort of how you have to understand how the whole tax procedure works and why this is so important. What the government does generally should be reviewed by courts. Okay, that's just general constitutional concept, something called procedural due process. You can't take someone's process without giving them the due process. Now, who defines due process? Well, the courts do. In this case, they define it as such. You have to give them the administrative appeal. If that fails, now you get a right to tax court, which actually isn't a court. It's actually an executive. It's actually an executive branch court. Whatever, it counts. You also can go to federal court if you want to. That's what's way too expensive, and you also probably have to pay your tax in advance to claim a refund. So this gives you that into tax court, and this is why it's important, because when you're going to argue your case to the appeals officer, if you do it correctly, that appeals officer has to think, if I don't agree with the taxpayer, what are the hazards of litigation? That is, will we prevail in tax court? The IRS does not want to have any bad tax court decisions against them. And if you look at the opinions, you'll see most of them are in the IRS's favor. But even without looking, I already know the reason why. Most tax court petitions fail because people do not properly respond to the LT11. Even if they do, they won't show up for the hearing. They won't present any reasonable collection alternatives. They won't give the appeals officer anything the appeals officer needs to do their job. So when it goes to a tax court petition is filed, the court just says, you didn't give us an adequate record for review. Bye. You're gone. And that was because you didn't do it correctly. Now, as you can see, I don't know what I said there is something that a regular taxpayer is taught, in school. It's like, this is sort of administrative law. I remember being taught this in law school. It's unfortunate that this whole system, you have to have that legal mind to understand how it all works, and most people don't.
No.
And so they're just like, okay, just send this in. And if you're relying on the instructions, so just in these instructions, where did it say, hey, if you blow this, you're going to lose your right to tax court, so you really should file this and come up with a really good reason why we should accept something different? It never does.
No, it doesn't.
No.
And I think a lot of people have a knee-jerk reaction. They may borrow money from a family member, but that's sort of a not the best a way to solve this problem, because when you don't have a lot of money, that's the best time to negotiate with the IRS, because they're going to look at your assets. So it might be a good time to go, hey, IRS, I can't afford this. I want to get into an installment agreement or an offer and compromise, which we help people do all the time and save them so much money. But if you, say, borrow money from a family member and you pay off this tax debt, and then you still have new tax debts working for this year and the next year and the next year, you're never going to be on dry land.
Right, and you can't borrow money from them again.
Right.
Yeah, that's
there's only so many rich
there's
family
only so
members.
Many, yeah, there's only so many times. So, look, borrowing money is fine. It's great. But make sure you have, the deal in place first, and make sure everything's everything's nailed down. That, oh, yeah, here, this will knock it out. And make sure you include what you're going to be repaying the money you owed when you figure out your budget, to say, oh, yeah, this will all work out. Instead of just like, let me just go manically around to try to scrape up some money. Okay, I borrowed some money from a buddy. Okay, hopefully this goes away and hopefully something comes through. That could really be a bad thing. And I've known, I've known of a few stories of people really, where their family members really, came through for significant amounts of money. Really sort of went a little too deep, in my opinion. And it's like, why did you do that? Because they didn't look at your collection potential of everybody you knew. They just look at your collection potential, unless someone wanted to give you a loan, is nothing. So settle. You can settle for this amount. Okay, borrow that $1,000 now from your family member. Okay, now you can pay them back that $1,000 instead of the $200,000. Oh. Yeah, I've seen that. It's like, geez, if you just got some real advice, no one would have wasted their money like this. And now there's, you're talking about, you don't repay a $200,000 loan to someone, or you run up a new IRS debt. There's really, you're not going to look so good in front of that family member, and it's going to cause a lot of problems until that's really taken care of.
Yep. Now, something new is, what happens if I don't respond to this letter or don't pay? Well, obviously, they're going to levy your things like wages, other income, bank accounts, yada, yada, yada. But there's a new law saying the IRS can now revoke or deny your passport if you owe over $50,000, including penalties or interest. So that sort of adds another layer of what happens if I don't respond to this letter. It does make it a little more insane.
Yeah. Well, you overheard me talking to one of my favorite revenue officers the other day. I was just talking to him about some of the cases he was working. He was explaining to me sort of what we've noticed. Our number one profession we represent isn't the plumbers of years ago, isn't the contractors. It's really attorneys. So you attorneys out there, let me tell you what he's doing. This is pretty clever. He's going around. He's looking up your number on the websites to see what cases you're assigned. He's looking to see who your client is.
Wow.
Then he sends your client levy notices.
No way.
Yes. And I know him, and he's like, well, that is not his lead-off move. These are people who don't respond to him, who are continuing to run up debts, doing all the wrong things. I know it happens, and sometimes the IRS isn't exactly like they'll bend, but just like a judge who you ask that continuance too much or that excuse too much, then it doesn't happen, and it's like that. So
that's crazy.
That is that's really embarrassing, because a lot of these people, they probably don't owe you any money. They're just old clients, and now your old client learns, what's going on? What's this all about? And they're calling you to say, hey, I got this notice from the IRS. Yeah, I know.
Wow.
Yeah, and then he also says that he will go, and this is something to keep in mind, that state bars don't necessarily would take your license away for unpaid taxes. I mean, there'd be a lot less attorneys if that was the case. And what happens, though, if they do go for injunctive relief or something in courts where you don't pay, most jurisdictions, if you have an unpaid judgment from a state court in which you're licensed, that's grounds to have your license removed.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's some pretty big hardball. And I was pretty, I guess, impressed, I guess is the word. I mean, wow, okay, well, you got your job to do. It is legal what you're doing, and it is public knowledge.
Right.
And
that's really,
wow, yeah, so
really interesting intel.
Yep.
All right, well, if you have received a notice LT11 from the IRS, you're not sure what to do, don't hesitate to contact us. It's 888-727-8796. You can also email us, info@irsmedic.com. You can like and comment below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more awesome tax updates. We want to thank you so much for watching.